Hi, Laura.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Happy Friday. It is Friday. I was like, what day is it?
Yeah, it's right. I'm worried it's really dark. It's just a bit grey out there, but it's April. We can't complain.
I know. Well, I was thinking, like, when is spring or summer starting? Because I mean, it's May next week.
I know, but you know what? I keep saying this. I keep flashing back to last summer. You know that hottest day, and I'm just like, no, I can't. I can't do it again. So like, I'm not going to complain about the weather. Like, be grey. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, I know. A little sunshine wouldn't go amiss. But anyway, um, usually I start episodes with like backstory and journey and how you got into beauty. But I just wanted to throw a question out there of what is beauty to you? And obviously we'll talk about it at the end on like what your version of beauty is. But I think like you're a beauty journalist and
Yeah.
you get access and visibility to beauty from so many different angles. So I was just interested to start this in a different way to what I usually do. And then we'll backtrack. But yeah, what is beauty to you?
I think beauty to me is self-expression. So in the same way that fashion is what you wear, that kind of you can almost represent aspects of your personality through your fashion. I see that with beauty and like with the brands you align yourself with and how it's kind of ever changing. You can change how, do you know what I mean? Like if I'm feeling in a certain mood, my makeup like might reflect that. Um, and also just how everyone is approach to beauty is different. So like reflecting that, I see beauty as like real individuality and yeah, self-expression, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely think like the industry's a really colourful space at the moment, isn't it? And it moves and changes all.
Yeah. And I think I definitely see beauty more like that because being plus size, I can't, and I still can't really represent my personality through my clothes, but I can do it through like my hair, through my makeup. So for me, that's probably how I see it because that has always been my outlet.
Yeah, that's interesting. How talk us through that journey then of like coming into a space of expression through beauty.
So I guess it was always a thing I loved. Like even when I was like I had a Saturday job in the bakers, right? And I used to mop the floors after school and then I got promoted to Saturday girl. And I remember even then, like I would save up and I would go and buy, this was like when Versace had a makeup line and I would go and buy like their lip glosses. It just made me feel like, I guess it made me feel like more than like a Saturday girl working in a baker's, you know what I mean? It really made me feel like someone. And then I'd say where I am kind of now, I guess for a long time, makeup was, I just loved it because I just had full access to it, you know? I guess it's a bit like if I was like a size 10 and had full access to Zara, you know? I've always had full access to beauty. So for ages I would wear so much makeup and I just would love, I would spend like an hour doing my makeup because I just love doing it. And to now, I just want to have more fun with my makeup. So like I'm probably more creative. I mean, not now. With my makeup, like I might try like kind of more colorful looks. I'm trying to do that with my hair as well. Um, I feel like just kind of like seeing makeup as and hair and beauty as just more of like an experimentation and like to kind of reflect my mood and a bit of like an art form as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm literally sitting here with like a nude lip, mascara, like yeah, real art form.
No, I think that's the beauty of it. Like I've got no makeup on today, but yesterday I had like a full face of makeup and I just it's how I wanted to be. And I think that's the point. Like you can be whoever you want to be by what you put on your face.
Yeah, it is like, isn't it? It's like painting. It's I don't know. I don't definitely don't spend as long as on my makeup as I used to. I don't. I think I almost get bored quicker now. Like I'm like, how did I spend an hour? Like now my makeup is always like 10 minutes. But also like I feel really comfortable with no makeup now.
Yeah.
Whereas before I would never have felt comfortable with no makeup. Do you know what I mean? Like I like that I have that balance now.
Yeah. What was the journey of that? Like being comfortable, more comfortable in your bare skin.
I think for like a lot of people, it was probably COVID.
Yeah.
Like you just got kind of used to it. And like, because I remember before COVID, like when I worked at Cosmo, and a few times, say if we were filming something, I'd go into the office with no makeup on, like really early, and I'd feel like awkward, like looking someone in the eye, or do you know what I mean? You know that thing where you're like, um, and then also kind of being online more. Like sometimes I got to a point where it was frustrating to want to film a video or like make a story, but having to put makeup on to do it. Do you know what I mean? It would be like, oh, I just want to like say something on my stories, but I look like shit.
Yeah.
And then I feel like we'll just look like shit. Like, and also it's I just think people get it more because I'm not constantly sitting here like I've done my makeup for this podcast. Like, so just to kind of pop up with your hair like chucked on top of your head,
Yeah.
like not a stitch of makeup on, actually makes people kind of feel more comfortable with you. Do you know what I mean? And it's also like it's just more of like what real life is. So I think, yeah, COVID, a combination of just getting basically realizing I wouldn't get half the things done if I waited until I had a full face of makeup on. So kind of laziness as well.
So interesting because I actually have stopped creating content for the channel and I just put podcast clips on there and I'm like, should I start doing them again? Because part of me enjoyed them, part of me hates them, but I used to procrastinate because I couldn't be bothered to put my makeup on or I didn't want to put my makeup on.
Yeah.
I really like having a fresh face and I like at times not wearing makeup and at times I love wearing makeup, but a lot of the time I find it a bit of a chore to put on.
Yeah, and I think especially say if you've done your whole working day from home or whatever, and you know you're literally putting on makeup to film this video, it's like, oh. And I think TikTok was huge for that because like people on TikTok are, I know I wouldn't think anything of someone that had no makeup and I watched their whole video. You know, and you realize you're like, I don't necessarily want to see someone in like full glam. So why am I holding myself to that standard?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? It's funny how like we're comfortable with seeing things from other people, yet not from ourselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just it's that hypercriticalness, isn't it? Of like you realize that when you look at yourself, you see it's always how I think of like back when I was at school, it's always how I thought like boys saw like girls, how just like kind of like a blur. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how you see everyone else, but to yourself, it's like you see every pore in your skin, you see like every single like wrinkle, every grey hair poking out.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's just realizing that no one cares that much about your face, which
Yeah.
is, is actually quite refreshing.
Yeah, I think so. We did dive right in, but you're a beauty journalist
Yeah.
and you kind of give us a bit of a backstory about how you started to like beauty and enjoy beauty, but give us the rundown of like how you became a beauty journalist because we've had a couple of other journalists on the podcast and their journeys have been completely different and I think I said it in those episodes too, but journalism is one of those things that it's almost, I don't know if you feel like this but because you are a journalist, but I've always thought that journalists are a bit like over there, not they're not so much now because of social media, but very behind the scenes and very telling the story and all eyes, all ears, but actually,
Like a war journalist, like a proper journalist.
yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, I think they're a bit like in the average person's mind, like a bit out of touch. Does that not out of touch, but like out of sight kind of thing? I don't know where. Do you know
Yeah. Well, it's
what?
like a behind the scenes role, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
almost like before you wouldn't, it was about your output,
yeah. Well,
not
where I'm going with it,
you.
yeah, and it's quite interesting for people to hear the behind the scenes of it and how the realities of like becoming a journalist because it's a really cool job. And like I said before, you get whichever industry you're in, but with beauty, you get it from all different angles, from a brand perspective, from a consumer perspective, from a product perspective, from an events perspective, or beauty in real life, or body image, or how beauty makes us feel. Like you talk about it from loads of different angles. So let's go into that. But yeah, share your story of how you got into journalism.
I feel like I've told it so many times it's boring, but so I try and like, and it's also really there's no clear path here. So I really took the long route and got lost several times. So I went to like a normal comprehensive school, and I was one of those people that never knew what they wanted to do. And I feel like if you feel like that, like there's such a kindred spirit between us, because it's the worst. I always say it's the worst when you just don't know what you want to do, because like I remember kind of year 11, and it was like, stayed on at sixth form because it was like, well, what else am I going to do? Like a lot of things I just was like, well, what else am I going to do? It was almost like delaying making a decision, which is classic me. So yeah, just never knew. I went to uni for like 2 days and quit. I was like such a failure in so many ways. And I'd always loved beauty, but yeah, and I'd always been arty. So I went down an art route and doing makeup, like actual like makeup application. So I did after uni, no, after college, like after sixth form, if you want to do art, you have to do like a foundation degree in art first. So again, I was like, well, I'll do my foundation, which is a year at college. And I was like, well, I'll do that. Like I've delayed another year. Yes. So I did that. And then again, when you have to like choose a specialism. And again, it was like, I don't know what I want to specialize in. I could never visualize a job out of it. And like now I'm older and I look back and I'm like, oh, you could have done that and you could be making plates for like John Lewis and designs, but at the time I I couldn't grasp it.
Where
And
were you? Where were you brought up?
in Croydon, so just outside, it's like South London, like Greater London.
Yeah.
But I think also because I didn't have, like, my dad was a printer, my mum works with like nursery schools. I guess I didn't know anyone that had like a creative
Yeah.
job. And I don't know, I've spoken to people since, like, I feel so many people in this industry have gone to like a private school. And I remember I was talking to Dom Skinner, who's on the Glow Up, Matt Creative, I think it's creative director, I probably got that wrong. And we went to the theatre together and we were just talking. I think we talked about politics. And he was just saying how, like, you just don't ever, if you went to like a comprehensive school, you just think certain things aren't for you. You can just never, because you're never made to think that is an option. Do you know what I mean? It's always like, oh, you'll be a teacher, or you would go and work in an office. Do you know, I think in some ways you are a bit limited by your surroundings. And I just didn't have anyone that was like, this is a job, Like I knew I wanted something in beauty, but like I didn't know kind of what the options were.
That's kind of why I asked, because I think and I'm the same. I come from a small little town in Yorkshire, and it's really hard to break the mold. And then it's really hard to keep breaking the mold, and also to keep believing in yourself that actually what you want to do is achievable, because everyone else around you is not doing that. Do you know what I mean? It's a really
Yeah,
hard thing to get
I just think that's why I could never like envision a career kind of thing, or even like fully understand some of these like options that I could have had. So yeah, the college was also doing like actual like makeup courses in the evenings. So I started doing a makeup course in the evenings because I loved the makeup. And some of my portfolio, oh God, it was always, my poor brother was always the model, and oh God, I can see why. But I was like, okay, I can do that. Like I like this. So then that was like my hyper focus. So I was like, right, I'm gonna apply to London College of Fashion, because that was the one I'd heard of to do makeup, and I wanted to do it. I love film, so it was like, well, I want to do makeup on films. And I got an interview, and I remember I didn't get in, and like their feedback was that I should apply for the fashion side, because you would either do like film, which is more special effects, or fashion. And I remember at the time I was like, I hate fashion, like no. And looking back, I can totally see why they said that, because I don't have that attention to detail. I'm not a perfectionist. I am much more of a little creative that's very much like, I don't know, a bit wilder maybe. So I would have, that like expression would have suited me better with fashion. But at the time I was like, I like films though. Like I don't like fashion. So once I got turned down from that, I was like, well, I'm lost because everything had been, focused on that. So yeah, I went to this other uni for 2 days. We will gloss over that and I quit. I mean, it was like a day and a half, and I didn't even go to a single lesson. So don't ever feel like a failure compared to that. And then I think my mum and dad were like, look, I obviously at this point, if you think how much like further education I'd done, it was like, you need to just get a job. So I got a job in insurance and I was there for like 6 years. And it's so interesting that you can just, it's absolutely wild to me that school is so focused on what you're good at. And this whole time it was like picking a specialism. And I ended up in a job that I was not very good at.
Yeah.
And like it's so weird how, okay, so all of that was for nothing. And it was basically like work calculating like death benefits and for people that were off work sick. And I hated it. And I just think I was just then stuck in it because like once you're in that, how do you get out? But then my privilege was that my dad is a huge Crystal Palace fan and he has a season ticket. And the person that he sits next to and still does is Louise, who was the editor of Cosmopolitan, Louise Court.
Yeah.
So she basically, her PA left, and obviously I think my dad must have said nice things to her about me because I was like an admin assistant, and she asked me to interview for her PA role. And I remember when she offered me the job, and it was like it was a big pay drop basically. And it was really difficult because I had done as well. It's hard because I'm missing out stuff, but also in between, I had done interning at magazines because I also had attempted to be a beauty therapist. So I have,
Yeah.
this will take me ages, but I knew it was something in beauty I wanted. So that's why I interned on the beauty desk. And that's why I was like, oh, I'll be a beauty therapist, and none of it. So when Louise finally gave me this offer of PA, I remember I almost said no because it was this pay cut. And I was like, it's not what I want to do. But I remember just thinking, like, you literally cannot turn this down. Like, it was more like, if you turn this down, what would everyone say? Like, this will be your life forever. So yeah, I became Louise's PA at Cosmo, and that's how I finally got in.
Yeah.
But I really went like round the absolute houses and back again.
Yeah. I think there's learnings in that there of like, also I have this conversation with myself a lot. Like I'm really slow paced. It takes me ages to do everything. It takes me ages to think about things. I get overwhelmed really quickly. So then
We are like the same person.
yeah, but then I came to the conclusion that nothing's going to happen really quickly for me because I wouldn't be able to cope with it. So like the podcast,
That's so true. That's so true.
but and like the podcast, for example, when I first started, I was like, I want it to get to this many downloads. I want to have a production. I want to do this and I want to do that. And I want to feature in magazines and I want to do all of this stuff and I want to host. And I'm like, and that's going to take you at least like a good few years because when you need to be established, and two, I couldn't cope. If that happened to me tomorrow, I won't be able to cope with it because it's just not how I'm paced.
Yeah, that overwhelming is something that I've probably only in the last like 2 years realized. Like, I never use the word overwhelmed so much, but I feel like if you know what you can cope with and what you can't cope with.
Yeah. So then I think like your journey of going around the houses, so to speak, like I think it teaches you so much about yourself, but also you've probably picked up loads of different information along the way that you wouldn't have.
Yeah, and I think it also did make me realize what I really want. Because I remember when I was interning, basically I'd use my holiday from work. So I used my annual leave and intern. So I really needed like a longer internship to kind of break that cycle. And there was one with Best, and it was a year-long internship. And I remember I had to do a project for it. And I think I got down to the final two. And when I didn't get that, I remember like that I was like crushed. And so, you're like, I do really want this.
Yeah.
It did help me realize what other stuff that I gave up, like the uni and the makeup, like actual artistry. I wasn't crushed about that, but I was crushed that I didn't get this internship.
Yeah. Why do you think you like didn't do uni, or you use the word failure a lot? Like,
I think I really did feel like there's a lot of things at that time. So I am quite a homebody. I'm definitely like close to my family. So I went to this uni in Somerset, and it's always also I still feel, do you know what? It's something now that I still feel embarrassed about. Like it is one of those things that like I will joke about it, like, but every now and then, like, I don't know if you have a brother, but what brothers are like. And my brother would be like, "Oh, do you remember when you went to uni, Law?" I'm just like, shut up. Um, and I had a boyfriend at the time, like, and I don't think I wanted to go. I think that was I think if I'd really, it wasn't what I really wanted to do, but I just kind of gone through the motions because I didn't know what else to do. Like, even remember being in like IKEA and getting all my like stuff and thinking like, I wish I could just tell my mum I don't want to go. But I felt like it was too late. And also a bit like you, because I do have to, I always feel like I'm a bit delayed.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes it's hard because it's like I know I do need a bit of pushing. So it's hard to know when it's like you need a bit of pushing or when you genuinely are like, actually, no, I don't want to be pushed.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Yeah, and I think at that age as well, like, I don't know if it ever fully goes away, but you're comparing yourself to what everyone else is doing. And so if everyone else is going to uni and you don't want to, you're like,
Yeah, all my friends are at uni, and like is like my sister is like the brains of our family, and she was just like excelling, and it was just like, oh, well, like, and again, like, again, not really knowing my options. It was like, well, if I don't go to uni, yeah, it was like an office, you know what I mean? It was just like, well, and you just feel like it's just the end of the world. Like, I don't know, it's weird how your life feels almost like so short at that point. It's like, well, because people don't stay in the same careers now at all. But I guess because I'm 36, so when I was at school in that kind of age, I do think approach to careers were different. I'd like to think they were different now, but it was very much like it's like a career for life. Whereas like now, no one would say that.
yeah, I was actually going to say to you, like, do you think it would be a different story if you were going through the education system now? Because I feel like we're exposed to a lot more are we exposed to a lot more opportunities?
I kind of think if I was, to be honest, if it was still the same school, still, I think it would be similar. I think, yeah, I think realistically in those kind of options, I think it would probably be similar.
Yeah, interesting. What is it about failure that kind of triggers something, do you think?
I think it's like embarrassment. Or like, why couldn't I do something that everyone else could do? Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone else went to uni and absolutely loved it and had like the time of their lives, and it's like, oh, I miss home. So I think it's like, I think it's a bit of embarrassment. And one of the things that kind of, I mentioned being like plus size and stuff, and like as I've kind of like met more people online, read more things, I think one of the things when you feel, I think one of the things like when you're bigger and you feel like, I don't know, you've had like a lot of horrible like abuse over to you over the years, you almost want to make up for the fact that you're bigger. So I know it sounds silly, but like being really kind, being like a good person. So it's almost like I feel like my whole life I've almost wanted to make up for the fact. So it's like I have less room for error. Do you know? I don't know if that makes any sense. So it's kind of
Really emotional.
oh,
No, I always cry.
so I feel like it's like I can't be a bad person or not a good person because people don't necessarily see me as a good person to begin with, so I have to fight harder. And then I don't know if I'm making any sense, but yeah, it's kind of like I have to like, I don't know, if I mess up, it's like, oh, you might not get like that second chance.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's a lot, you know, you like kind of, you know, when people say like, oh, in therapy, I'm not in therapy. I feel like it's very like American to say that, but it's the kind of stuff, and I do think you can have too much therapy, but there is definitely stuff that I've like seen online, and I think I can really relate to that. I could really relate to that thing of having to almost go above and beyond because you're like the fat one.
Yeah. Where does that, I mean, I know where it comes from, but I want to ask you like where that comes from and when you started to realize that. Because actually, let's dive into that because I've never actually spoken about it probably in the depths that we'll probably go into in terms of being plus size or feeling like you're bigger, and therefore having to, because saying it out loud is crazy to hear, like having to make up for it in other areas, or like not being able to be a failure or think like we're all human, like everyone messes up and everyone makes mistakes, but to have that pressure on yourself sucks.
I honestly only realized it like quite recently, like in the last couple of years, because I always had this thing of like I would really hate that idea that I upset someone. And I know that's like a kind of people pleaser, isn't it? But it would make me really upset. And then it was kind of also realizing that like I don't know, I was going kind of above and beyond to kind of have like to be almost like want that acceptance from people. And like I think I don't know, it's stuff like I was reading this book recently and it was talking about this girl that's plus size and she's dating this boy and it's from the boy's perspective. And he's saying how like he was talking about how like he it's horrible how it's worded. It's like, oh, the fat girl is always happy to see you and she always remembers exactly what you've been doing. And I was like, yeah, all of that stuff where I don't know, I could just really relate to it, this feeling of like you were trying so hard because you want them to,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like just to constantly be that best version of yourself because you want them to be like, I'm fat, but look at all these other great things I am. Do you know what I mean? It's like you just, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard because it's also some of those things like to unpack them fully, I feel it's like I did do CBT once for anxiety and like sometimes they ask you a question, you're like, I don't know. And they're like, okay. And they make you like break it down. And sometimes like almost breaking it down that much to get to the root, you know what the answer is, but you just don't want to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go from here.
It's like,
It's so thought provoking though, isn't it? And it's just, I just think
yeah.
people like to be made to feel this is the whole, like such an ammunition for what the podcast is and what the podcast is about, because to be made to feel a certain way because of how you look, to me is just like I can't comprehend it in my brain. So when I have conversations like this, I'm almost at a mute point because I don't get it. I just find it the strangest thing. And I think, I can relate to some stuff you've said, and I always got kind of bullied for being bigger and stuff when I was younger. And it always, even now, like made me feel not good enough, or like I didn't fit in with the crowd or whatever. And it sucks to be made to feel like that, but to feel like you have to make up for it in certain areas or go above and beyond, that's actually not okay.
Yeah, and I think it's something you don't realize. Like I said, I only think I realized it like recently, but I think it's kind of almost like I know if someone was to like insult me, it would always be like you fat bitch or something. Like it would always be that would always be the thing that's used. And I feel like if I didn't have that, it's like I don't want to give them a reason to insult me because I know what the insult will be.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's even in like those situations you just want to be, I don't know, like if someone was rude to me, I almost wouldn't want to be rude back because I know where it will go and I know that how hurt I'll get. I won't be able to like deal with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much like yeah, school and like
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like you are accepting of yourself?
I think
Because
yeah,
speaking from like the outside looking in, and we can go into this if we want to, but you seem really happy and bubbly and confident and get comfortable in who you are. So I'm interested to hear like how
I
you.
feel like I'm comfortable in like I'm like there's a lot of things that I'm a lot more confident than I used to be. So I feel like I know I'm a good person. I know that like like I know like I'm inherently a good person. And I think if you know that about yourself, that's like a huge thing. But I wouldn't say that I love being bigger. I love how I look. But my main thing is that like I just don't want anyone to feel like they have to look a certain way. Like I don't to kind of like succeed. And I almost want to like my how I how I try and look at it is like, I don't want how I look or like my size to be a discussion point. Do you know what I mean? It's like if I wasn't plus sized, I wouldn't probably have the confidence question or anything. And I almost want it to just be like that. I just want to be me. But do you know what I mean? I think also because of how much I've read and like I think the journey that I've been on and understanding like I mean I wish there was a different term than fat phobia because I think it turns people off. But I think once you have read so much and you know so much, and I know my own experience and others, I'm like so passionate about it that like I don't think how I feel about myself matters. It's more like
Mhm.
uh, I treating people like humans. You know what I mean? Like I almost think how I feel about myself is like that doesn't matter. That's actually not the point.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I think I don't know. I think it's a hard one because I think whether it is being plus size or skin tone or being super tall, like being super short, like I think there's so many things that if you don't fit into a certain whatever, and I used to hate beauty for this. I really had a hard time getting over it. And now I do this and it helps me to understand a lot better. And hopefully, like for people listening, it helps them to understand that whether you're quote unquote perfect or you fit into this demographic of, I don't know, whatever beauty is, even those people feel insecure about something. Like we're all just navigating the same feelings a lot of the time, just in a different way or a different form.
Oh yeah, and you're talking to someone that you would say is like
Mm.
completely fits like every you know stereotype of like beautiful, and they'll tell you something about themselves or something about their life, and you think, God, I had no idea you felt like that. And I guess it's like humanizing because you can go the other way because you can be like, oh, you're blonde and you're slim and you're like you're the perfect height and you're a model. Like, what do you have to? But it doesn't mean there's something that they don't have that they don't feel about, and it's just how like a society has deemed them like kind of perfect.
Yeah, completely. And I guess that leads nicely onto like your socials. And I know you talk a lot about inclusive beauty and creating a safe space in beauty. Like, is that where that kind of conversation stemmed from?
Yeah, 100%. And just I think just also yeah, feeling kind of alienated with beauty. And like even now I think beauty still has such a long way to go, because I always say this every time, but I get so annoyed like with brands like being diverse, and I feel like you can really tell when it's not, when it's disingenuous. So like for example, the it's not beauty, but you know Dylan Mulvaney and the Budweiser campaign. So Dylan is trans and has literally it was just a, I think it was almost like just an ad that she did where they'd put her face on a can or something and it like blew up, and like far right America has just gone like the amount of transphobia, and like they're all like refusing to buy Bud Light and stuff.
Mhm.
And I saw that Budweiser, like the CEO, put out a statement, and it was almost like the words in it were almost like an apology. It was a really weird statement of like they didn't like say they stood with Dylan. It was very much like it was the wording of an apology. And it's like, I'm not saying they shouldn't have worked with Dylan, but it's like in some ways it's like it wasn't genuine. It was disingenuous. You used her, and I'm kind of sick of brands. It's like if you're going to work with a Dylan or someone, you need to really be there for them, for like the amount of hate she's had from it.
Yeah.
And I just think I just see it so many times, and it'll be like, oh, like I won't name the brand, but like they'll do an ad campaign and it'll have like someone with like vitiligo, someone with like a prosthetic, but then you'll see they're doing like trips or like away like trips, and like there's not a single like non-diverse, I'm using quote marks, person on the trip. And it's like, well, if this is so part of your like brand's DNA, like that would be the first thing you kind of think of. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and so I'm kind of, I feel like we've got to a better place in some ways. Like I did get I got an SPF this morning from Skin Proud, and I really liked it because it had, I don't have it, had a like a plus size model, like, and you don't really get that, or like the new Glossier lipsticks, and they had an older model, and I was like, it's so nice when you see it, and it does feel just like completely natural. They haven't been. I always said about Andrew Fitzsimon's campaign where he had a plus size model, and she was like, it was just her. She wasn't in a group. So I think when it is, how much it means to someone when it is genuine and you finally feel like seen for the first time, like you can't describe how that feels.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that, and I think it's really important and for brands to be doing it, and it's really impactful when they get it right. I think, like, from my experience, and I've spoken about it on here loads of times, like I've worked for brands that you literally get a list and it's like white, black, Asian, mixed race, and you literally, and this again, a bit of a reason why I started the podcast, because I was like, this is not, you can't do this, like take your list back and like just do my own thing. But I've also worked for brands that are really passionate about representing their consumer in an authentic way. So Inculist, for example, like I worked for them, and they were really passionate about having real faces. It doesn't matter what you look like, who you are, whether you have a following, like it doesn't matter. It's let's get people in who are actually buying from us and put them in our campaigns.
Yeah, so nice to hear. And I know there are things like I always hear, I don't know if it was ASOS that said it or someone else, but like they're on the curve section, for example, they always said that like bigger models, if they use them, the clothes didn't sell as well. And I know there's things like that, but I just, if there's more of a kind of norm, if it becomes more of the norm, do you know what I mean? Where we're just using a true cross section of people that do represent the people that we see every day. Do you know what I mean? Rather than just these people that you're just almost using, like you are using them to an extent. And if you're not, if it isn't your focus, and even like, you know, we've all seen the news stories of how they'll have like a disabled or someone with a disability, and then the event doesn't have like disabled access, or, you know, stuff like that, where it's like, if it's learnings for everyone.
Yeah, completely. And I do think, I mean, there are some brands that do tick boxes or whatever, but I do think brands have a hard job in getting it right because of that stereotype that's come previously. So like what you were saying now about, you know, plus size products not selling as well, that's because we've all been told historically that the goal is to be a size 8 tall blonde model, and it's not realistic, and it's setting the standard. Is it setting the standard too high? It's just setting an unrealistic approach to what is normal. And it's really sad. It's really sad. But I agree that, you know, that more and more brands get into the conversation of reality, then it will become more normal. It's definitely, it's just how far is it going to go?
Yeah, because even if you put it just like, if you equate to something like skincare, where when The Ordinary started, and Brandon, who founded The Ordinary, and his idea was so like groundbreaking, this idea that your skin care would be like ingredients led rather than like problem solving. But now that's a huge thing, and how many people now know, could like list 3 skincare ingredients, whereas before they would never have a clue. They would just know like anti-aging day or night cream. So that you can like shift, and just because it's been the norm doesn't mean it is the best way either.
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree. And I think some of these smaller challenger brands are really making waves. Like The Ordinary is an amazing example for that. And puts things into perspective of just how powerful you can be if you get it right.
Yeah.
I think beauty is an anomaly, and I've always said this, and it's like, when you work in beauty, the community is insane. Like, it's just womanhood, and it's obviously not all positive, and there are aspects of it, but from my personal experience, it's where I've met some of my best friends. Like, I've felt part of the community, and it's really, everyone kind of looks out for each other. And again, I know there's other sides of that as well, but it's an industry that everyone is obsessed with, whether you like it
Yeah.
or not, like everyone is obsessed with beauty. I know why I think that is, but interested to hear like your thoughts on it and like dive deeper into the beauty chat. Um,
I think because beauty gives people a kind of, it is problem solving. So a lot of people, they will be like, oh, have you tried this? Because and does it really work? You know, so that it appeals to that of like, you have a problem, this product can fix it. So it's almost kind of beauty still sells you a dream. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas other things like fashion, apart from say if it was Skims and it's saying that it's gonna, you know, like I don't know, it's gonna help like smooth everything out. Fashion doesn't do the same thing. Like beauty can solve a problem that you hate about yourself, or just something that you want to improve about yourself, or something that you've never done. Um, it's like almost like that bit of escapism as well. And I just think people love trying beauty products because that's always the number one thing of like, oh, I bet you get loads of like products. That's always what follows up with like, oh, you're a beauty journalist. I bet you get loads of products.
yeah. And I think it is trying, isn't it? But when I moved over to fashion, like I don't know if I've said it on here before, but I wrote a massive email to like loads of people in the company because I used to get, oh my God, your skin's so good automatically just because I work for a skincare brand. What products are the best? Does hyaluronic acid really work? Like, do you need eye cream? What moisture? And I was like, whoa, let's all calm down. But it's funny because it was like, I don't know, it was like, how do I do this? How do I get better this? How do I get better that? Which foundation works with which moisturizer? And it's almost like one, wanting to achieve an outcome, a bit like what you said, but two, like there's so much noise around it on socials and in magazines and in content that we all consume every day, and like even in like social groups, like it's such a talking point that it just makes people like fascinated and like have this infatuation with like wanting the best thing. It's so
Yeah. And it's just, yeah, because even like with my friends and stuff, and I think like, I don't know, like say if like I've done an ad or something and they know that I like one of my friends works for me, so sees like what I turn down. And then one of my other friends will be like, so does that really work? And I'm like, I wouldn't have, didn't you see me? Like, I wouldn't have spoken about it if it did. I think there's like real like skepticism from people. But if you get that just one word of mouth, like word of mouth is such a, I think that's why so many things go like viral on TikTok, right? So many random older products that have been out for ages. Because if you find someone that can kind of vouch for it, you're like, okay, I'm going to try it.
yeah, it's really
But
interesting.
yeah, the amount of people that ask, yeah, so many. And it's also really hard because sometimes it's like, I don't know if I can help you with that. You know, I mean, it's difficult of like, because I don't know your skin type, and it's like I don't want to recommend because often it'll be like, should I get this? Like, would it help my skin? And it's like, what if I tell you yes and it doesn't?
Yeah, and it is, and I think it's just, I say this to the guys at work all the time, like I just know my skin really well. Like I know which brands work for it, I know which don't, and some stuff that like trends just doesn't work for me, and I know it won't. So like I just stick to what I know, and also I keep it really simple, which they're also like bored about hearing. But I'm like, I use 5 products and they work, and it does make
I
my
think,
skin.
but I think that's also the key. Like people that have like these really like elaborate morning routines. I'm like, literally wear my SPF in the morning, cleanse my face and do an SPF, and that's it.
What are some of like your favorite beauty products, or like some stuff that you just love doing?
My favorite. So I love anything like skin barrier. So I'm obsessed with my skin barrier. So I love all of like CeraVe. If anyone ever asks me for a cleanser, I normally always just like go to Boots and get the hydrating CeraVe and you'll be fine. Um, makeup wise, I love like a glowy, lightweight foundation. So
What's it going?
um I love, what have I used? I have a lot of random brands. So I was obsessed with this one by Face Atelier because I found out it was used on Euphoria. So that's really nice. Like MAC Face and Body, the Makeup by Mario one. I like a lot of like, I'm obsessed with always finding what's used. I find it really interesting what makeup artists use because that always tends to be the stuff that's really good. So yeah, any kind of glowy foundation, cream blush, I remember like when I first started at Cosmo, my beauty director was obsessed with the cream blush. And I think I was just like, oh, I didn't get it. But now I'm like, oh, cream blush.
Yeah.
Inject it into my veins.
You ever want to go back to you once you started using it?
Yeah. But I get so excited about beauty. And I think that's why, like, not a lot of people talk about like imposter syndrome and things. And I feel like I don't have that because I know how much I love beauty. Like I'm such a beauty geek. I'm like, no, I'm good at my job because I just care so much. Like I'm honestly such an absolute like get a life beauty geek.
I think, I mean, you kind of have to be if you're a journalist in the
But
industry.
you say that, but so many people aren't. Like a lot of people, like they're not. I not obviously everyone, but some people really kind of. I always remember when I started, and it was I think it was a bit of a class thing to be honest. I remember like one of the beauty directors is not in it anymore. She wouldn't wear a single scrap of makeup, and I remember thinking like, and she definitely like would judge people that would, but I was like, I don't understand how you can be surrounded by all this makeup and not want to put it on your face. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and just have no interest. But I think everyone has probably like a more of a specialism, you know? So some people it is more of skincare than makeup. Some people it's more like fragrance or hair. So I think that can also come into it. Like, so I know Inga, my old boss, didn't really care about makeup, but skin, I mean, I still message her now. Like if any of my friends have something and I can't work it out, I'll always messaging her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. And I think I've worked in makeup and skincare and I loved skincare more. But I think for me, I'm way more about like the emotive side of it. So skincare for me, when you see someone's skin change and you see them change is really amazing because a lot of people get het up or insecure about acne, for example, which was always a big thing when I worked in skincare. And to be able to help someone through a product that you're marketing was always really cool to me.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think loads of people love it for such different things.
Especially if they're like, I've tried everything and like the one thing you recommended actually worked for them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, let's talk about like writing and your because you obviously write loads about loads of different stuff, but let's just share a little bit about that and like your approach to writing. Yeah.
So I was obviously so I didn't go to uni. I don't have like an English degree. Um, but I had a blog. And I have always been, I know it's not, like I feel like people are gonna listen to this and be like, no, but I think I'm quite a good storyteller.
Yeah.
So when I started working at Cosmo and I was still PA, um, because back in the day when I interned, and this is why it's hard now because people reach out to me and they're like, how can I get into journalism? And sometimes I feel like I'm probably not the best person to ask because it's so different now. But back in the day, you didn't really get to write much because they were monthly or weekly magazines where you would be doing stuff like I remember for some of the weeklies, I'd be doing like competition winners send outs or like completely random things. There weren't the websites, but when I was PA, the websites were in full swing and it was just about like content, content, content. So I remember like first being given a story to write about Ed Sheeran for the website. And I remember sitting there thinking, like it was such a huge thing, my first ever like byline. But I was really lucky when I finally got a beauty assistant. Well, I was kind of given it on a trial. I was basically given my first ever feature, print feature, was 7 pages. And I kind of knew I was like, this is definitely a test. But Farah Store, who was editor at Cosmo at the time, she took me into her office and basically taught me how to like lay out a feature. And I feel so lucky that I had that training because I think, and this isn't to shade anyone, because I think to be if you're just a purely digital journalist, your skills you have to have different skill sets. You have to know how to use Photoshop. You have to know how to, SEO and prioritize search things. But to be taught how to kind of actually lay out a feature and write, that was like invaluable. And then Inga, who was my beauty director, was, oh my God, the harshest critic. She would, so you would file to her and you would dread it. You would literally just be sitting there like, oh. And the worst would be like if she'd start reading it next to you, because she'd have a red pen, and Inga was such a character, but she would literally sit there, head in her hands, and be like, and like be crossing. And then she'd give you your feedback every time. Like she'd never take you into like a little meeting room. She would give you your feedback at the desk in front of everyone. And she'd be like, I don't know where you're going with this. Like she was like, and her phrase was always, you have to take the reader by the hand. And I remember for ages, I just was like, I don't get what she means by that. Like, I don't understand it. Like, I thought this was good, and you're saying it's not good. And you'd have to do so many edits. But now I feel like if I was given a 7-page feature, it wouldn't scare me in that way. It's like I know exactly what to do with it. So I think honestly that kind of like just I think I was lucky that although I didn't have necessarily have that education, I had a real like hands-on training with it. Like and it's hard. It's like filing to different people, because also once it gets through Inga, it would then go to the sub-editor who would then give it back to you, and then it would go to the editor who would give it back to you. So you could have one piece of like writing come back to you like 5 times, and honestly by like that 5th time you're like, I don't even care about this feature. I don't like,
Yeah,
you know, like I don't ever want to see this again.
yeah,
But it was, I feel so lucky, and I do think that's one thing that's really sad now that people don't get. Like they just don't get it because there's not time, there's not enough people, print isn't the same. But I also feel like there's a lot of people that I don't know, like obviously now when I edit other people's work, and I try and give like a different approach to Inga, but I try and give feedback because I'm like, you need to improve your writing. Like it's not great, but I also know they haven't had that same
yeah.
training, which at the time felt really difficult, but I'm so glad I had it.
Yeah, there's so much to be said for like harsh critiques or being in a challenging environment, because I was the same. I worked for a creative agency, like my first job when I was really young, and it was savage. And it was go, go, go all the time. We'd be in different countries, you'd come back, you never get a day off, like you wouldn't have any leave
Really?
time, just like hit the ground back from the airport, you go back. And we had an MD who was really, really harsh on all of us, and there was like 8 girls. I'm still really good friends with all of them now, but boy, it stood me in such good stead for like the rest of my career that's followed, because I can take feedback and it makes me stronger, not weaker. I don't take
Yeah.
it, and I'm like, this is
And I think especially like if you're a bit like how we said we were, where we're like you can get a bit overwhelmed and you're not, it can fit. It's really hard to, but also it does make you strong because you're like, oh, I can take that.
yeah.
And I also think it shapes you, how as you move on with your career and how you become that person that's having to like delegate to other people, it makes you realize how you want to communicate and how it's hard because sometimes I get stuff and it's like I'm like, oh, is it nice and not to tell them this isn't very good? Or I'm like, actually, no, like I can tell them they can do better. Like I try and word it in that way of like a few times, like I've just put to someone, like, I'm like, you could do better than this,
Yeah.
like on like on a headline or a cell. And that it's almost like kind of challenging them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I know, yeah, that kind of thing of, oh, just that constant, not living in fear, but just like that. Oh, it's in the moment, it's really hard.
Yeah. And I think when you're younger, especially in your early 20s, like everything's so important in your career, isn't it? And you take everything so personally, and it's harder to receive hard feedback. Whereas now I ask for it. I'm like, my manager thinks I'm crazy at times, but I'm like, just tell me what I'm doing wrong so I can get better. I kind of thrive with it now.
Yeah. Yeah, and like also like say if I've had stuff now that I've like if I've done a pitch and they don't come back with any edits, I'm like, well, they didn't even read it. Yeah, they didn't even read it properly because I know there's at least one edit in there. So it's funny how it's because you then expect like better of yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like you raise your own standards.
Definitely. In because obviously the press can get a bit of a bad rep in terms of beauty, and historically it's a lot to blame for setting these high beauty standards. How, as a journalist, do you write content and articles and publish content that is balanced, or that you feel balanced?
So I think, again, really lucky from who I've learned from. So in terms of my language, one person I always say, Paisley Gilmore, who's a sex and relationships writer. I did a podcast with her at Cosmo, all the way with. You can still listen to it. Little shout out. And I learned so much from Paisley in terms of like inclusive language, and making sure that you're not just assuming everyone you're writing to is in a heterosexual relationship, is like a cis woman. So I really credit her because I always just think of like, what would Paisley say? So I think definitely like learning from other people has massively helped me. And the same also with kind of hair, because it's so embarrassing to think, but like when I first used to write about hair, I was just writing about hair, assuming that everyone had hair like me. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm like mortified to say that out loud now, but it's true. Like, I just wouldn't even kind of think. So now, whenever I write about hair, and sometimes it is hard, like you do have to have, I've had stuff come back from editors, and I'm like, well, no, we need to have that in, where we need to add a separate section for, whether you have like European straight hair, wavy, curly to coily, or whether you do it by curl pattern. I need that extra word count because this can't all fit in. I think it's holding yourself to a standard, and because it's really easy in some ways. It would make your life easier. So many times it would make my life easier if I just was ignorant to it. Do you know what I mean? And you can still be like, it would be less work. It would take me, like when you're trying to get quotes from people, and it would be so much easier if I just went to the same dermatologist that I know can turn around a quote in a day. But if I want to make sure that I'm including like people from different walks of life, it's like challenging yourself. So it is it sounds bad to say it's difficult, but it does give you more work.
Yeah.
But I think the outcome is better. Um, so and then the beauty standards, I completely went off track there. And the beauty standards, it's difficult because with online, the difference with print, you could write about anyone and you don't really get to know the feedback. But with print, you can see how many people clicked on that article, right? And it's like I would get so annoyed at Cosmo where you'd always get the Facebook people be like, why do you insist on making the Kardashians famous? It's like, it's all you want to read about,
Yeah.
and we would always do this thing of like trying I'm obsessed with, and Emma Chamberlain is even a good example because she isn't in any way diverse, but I love Emma Chamberlain. And I would try and make Emma Chamberlain happen, but people just wouldn't like kind of click. But also it's sometimes, and not say with an Emma, but say with like like Simone Biles when it was the Olympics, and trying to like do a story on her hair, and just sometimes just doing them and just trying different people. And it's difficult because I will be honest, it is the same kind of celebrities that everyone does seem to care about, but you still make an effort to write about the ones that won't get as many clicks. But it's important that you don't have an entire website of like Kim, Kylie, Kendall, and Chloe.
And I think and I think when you work for somewhere like Cosmo, or you're writing for bigger publications, you've kind of got that space because you've got that wiggle room where not every single article has to have that.
Yeah, because I was going to say again, I was lucky in the sense that Cosmo would let you do that, in the sense of that they were also very passionate about it, and like they would want us to make sure that we were representing. And I know that if it did poorly and I was like, well, look, it's because I felt like we hadn't represented a single non-European hair type for so long, they would 100% have my back. But I do get it if you work somewhere different and it's not, and it's so numbers focused. But also I just think that is an example of where you almost can't be, again, it's that thing of a brand genuinely caring. And I think Cosmo genuinely care, but I obviously don't know if every other brand doesn't necessarily genuinely care.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I had I had a lady called Jamelia on, and she's it will be out by the time this is out, but she has a subscription hair care brand for like kinky curly hair. And I've got a lot of friends who are black and mixed race, but I just didn't know anything about it to the extent that she knew. So I was like, I just sat and asked her loads of questions. And actually we recorded it and it will go out next week, but it's good. Sometimes I'm like, is it good for me to be vulnerable? But equally it is, because if I'm learning, then everybody listening to this is learning. And I see it as a duty of care to have loads of different types and styles and varieties of people on here, because then I'm opening to learn, which means then listeners are opening to learn, and then you get loads of different viewpoints. And I think that, like, this is on a tiny scale, but when it is somewhere like Cosmo, it is their responsibility to do the same thing and to share as many stories from diverse backgrounds as possible.
And also, like, yeah, like you say, in that instance, you are putting yourself, because it's hard, 'cause you don't want to appear ignorant. You want to be like,
Yeah.
it's not that I'm racist, it's not that I don't care. And I think sometimes just admitting where you don't know. And I think it's really, I don't know, it is, I know exactly what you mean. It's really difficult sometimes to be like, well, I just don't know. Like, can you help me? And also, like, someone on Twitter might like get really annoyed by that, but you're coming from like a good place. You're coming from a place of wanting to learn. And if that person wants to teach you, then kind of why not? Because I always say, like, one of the things I've shared this before, I always remember. So Carl, who used to work on Sugarscape, he now works for the charts. I absolutely love him. Also, I don't know if it's just called the charts, but he's very hyper music. And I was still like, hadn't been at Cosmo that long, and Sugarscape and Cosmo worked in the same office. And I was talking to him and I described something as gay, like as in a negative way. And that was something at school that, like, in the era that I grew up, just happened. And it just came out of my mouth. I didn't even think of it. And he like called me up on it. And I remember even now, like, I literally think about that and I just feel so like absolutely ashamed.
I've done the
But
exact same.
I'm so glad he did it to me. Not at the time I was like, oh my God, I hate myself. But it was always like, because it was language that I had just, it was just learned language that I didn't even, it just came out my mouth, and I almost needed that to be like, just no, think about what you're saying. Like, I wasn't thinking before I spoke. And I remember I wanted to share that once in an article, and I think they took it out because they were like, that could be interpreted wrong. But I was like, no, I want to show that it was something that, like, I just hadn't considered. And then as soon as I did, oh my God, I never did it again, because I would just think of Carl and how, like, his reaction was just like, did you just?
Yeah.
So it's hard to make yourself vulnerable in that situation.
It is. And I think we're all learning, and I think the world is changing so much at a fast pace, where I keep using the word exposure, but we are all exposed to loads of different people and styles and voices and creative and interpretations of different stuff and backgrounds and lifestyles, that we can't know it all. So, like, I have such a thing of, you don't know what you don't know, and it's okay to ask a question, obviously, if it comes from the right place and it's articulated in a way that shows that you mean it in an authentic way.
Yeah, and it's so, like, even things like, I remember when I first started at Cosmo, and it's gonna sound like crazy, but I don't know if there was anyone Jewish at my school. I don't know, like, South London doesn't have, like, where I am in Croydon, not aware that there's a huge, like, Jewish community. So I remember at Cosmo, like, I was writing Christmas cards and I was like, but what do I do for the people that are Jewish? And I was just like, I was like, do I give them a card? Is that, like, offensive to give them a card? But is it more offensive to not give them a card? And and you're just like, it's really difficult, because especially when you just want to do, like, the right thing. And it's, yeah, it's really hard. And that's why I think we shouldn't, like, shy away from these discussions. Like, it's obvious when someone's coming from a place of malice, but when you're coming from a genuine place of, like, I want to do the right thing, how else, like, are we gonna learn?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think it's good, but I do think it is one of those things that feels like a challenge a lot of the time, because it's what is right and what's wrong, and I just want to get
And also
it.
the fact that, like, someone will say that's right and someone else will say that's wrong.
Yeah.
If you want to know, I ended up giving everyone a Christmas card, but, like, for some people, I just put have a nice break.
Hard, isn't it? I think, yeah, and a lot of brands are changing their language around Christmas to say,
Yeah, and taking, like, Eid into consideration, and, like, Hanukkah, and I think that is also really important because again, like I guess yeah, these huge Christian holidays, but also like Eid and like Diwali, they are absolutely huge for communities as well. And I think the problem is people think that like by acknowledging Eid, you are somehow taking away from like a
Mm.
Christian holiday, and it's like no, you're just
We're all,
not ignoring one that's existed for a long time and a lot of people celebrate.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think there's space for everyone and everything. So
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, don't you think? I think people just think that by giving space to someone else, you're taking away space from them, and I think it's just showing that that's not the case.
yeah, I just think there's such vibrancy in celebrating different lifestyles and religions. And I've said it on here quite a few times, but my best friend is really religious. She's Christian, and the stuff that I've learned that I didn't know existed. I didn't know this lifestyle existed. I didn't know a belief in this way existed, or faith, or and it's so interesting. And we just sit and I ask her questions and she'll ask me questions. And I'm just like, this is broadening my mindset so much. And I find it fascinating because I mean, it makes me tick to, I've got a podcast, it obviously makes me tick to be
Yeah.
curious about other people's lives. But I think it does open your mindset a lot.
Yeah, that just meeting different people and like and the effect they then have on you. Like I always say about like Paisley, I would never have met Paisley if it wasn't through work, but like she's impacted my life in such a positive way. So yeah, those conversations with people, it's only like I think it could only lead to good things.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Just kind of changing the topic a little bit, but what has been like a career highlight for you, both in beauty and in journalism?
I was like gonna be like, I have to think, and then I was like, no, 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 I know. So I definitely think when I did This Morning for the first time, I've done it a few times, but definitely doing that and being like, oh my fuck, I'm on live TV.
How did that
Can I
come
swear?
about?
Can I swear, by the way?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
So it came about because Vicky Laycock, who is the producer, well, she looks after, I think she does lifestyle and beauty. She just reached out to me and was like, do you want to come in and do like a test? And I was just like, oh my God, like, are you joking me? And then I remember I went in and did like a little rehearsal. And it's so weird, like being on that set, you're just like, oh, I'm in the TV. And it happened really quick. And like Vicky is, I absolutely love Vicky. She is, I think we're quite similar. We're both quite like chaotic, and she has the world's busiest job. So it's very much like she'll WhatsApp you and be like, can you do the show this Friday?
Mhm.
Um, and I remember like I just did it with like Holly and Phil, and like I just remember being there and then them starting the countdown of like 5, 4, and you just feel the sweat coming, and then like you're just talking, and like before you know it's over. And then I remember the mic guy was taking off my mic, and I was like, I'm really sorry, my back's really sweaty. um, but then I did it. I feel really proud that I've done it with all of them. So I've done Holly and Phil, Eamon and Ruth, and Alison and Dermot. So I'm like, if I never do it again, at least I did them all.
Yeah.
So definitely This Morning, just because I think the fact that like I feel so proud of myself that I did live TV. Like it was terrifying, and I genuinely felt quite ill like for a few days afterwards. And I think that was like adrenaline leaving my body. But I just feel so proud of myself that I did that. Um, and secondly would be Mario. So Mario, Makeup by Mario. Um, I did a feature with him back in the day. And you know what? There's a story. I haven't told anyone this. I'll tell you the nice thing, and I'll tell you that. Um, and then when Sephora launched here last year, he was coming over and being interviewed, and he asked if I would do the interview. And that was so I had to do like present it to like to a room of like 50 people at the Sephora event. And that was such a highlight, the fact that he asked for me. And like I just love that man.
I've met him before. He's great, isn't he?
He's just so kind. But yeah, the story I haven't told, because sometimes also I feel like we still you can still mess up now, right? So I had this Mario feature, and basically will come round. Like obviously you'll know this. People will email, be like, so and so's in town, and like their publicist will reach out, and if there's anything you want to do. So his publicist reached out that Mario was in town. This was before his brand, and like, did we want to do anything? And it's hard with Mario because I think because he is so popular, everyone has done something with him. And I remember it was Inga again. Inga forwarded it to me, and she was like, if you can think of a feature that Farah will want to read, who was our editor, she was like, I'm happy for you to like. So basically, the pitch that we would do, like Farah's obsessed with the idea of that he probably had all these really rich private clients and all of this. And she was like, oh, he can transform you and see what you look like. So the whole pitch was for him to do my makeup. So which we did. And the shoot went really well. He brought his mum. And I was so proud of this feature because I knew how happy it would like make him to like have just a feature on him. You know, like even though there was things in there that maybe challenged him slightly. I think a bit like how you were saying with journalists, normally the makeup artist is like behind the scenes and it all just very much tied to Kim. But there was an error in the feature when it came to print. So when it came to print, you send it like they don't get a copy beforehand. So even like a cover style wouldn't get the first time they see it is when, you know, you would email a PDF or send them a copy. So I sent his agent or his publicist a PDF of the feature. And basically there was an error where it said that he was from Armenia, but he's actually from Albania. And I cannot tell, even to this day, I don't even know why I'm telling you this because it is one of those stories that like haunts me. You know, when you suddenly think of something, it just makes you feel sick. And basically the transcription, it's one of those things where you're like, how the fuck did this happen? And I remember his agent was initially really angry and then apologized to me. And I couldn't amend the print, but I could amend like digital and I could amend the PDF and all of that. But I was so upset because it was like, all I wanted to do with this feature was to show like, I don't know, I just thought like Mario will be so happy with it. And all I could think was I've ruined the entire thing. And basically, sometimes like an intern would help you with transcribing. And so someone had helped me with transcribing, but also that's still on me to fact check it. And we had subs, but our normal sub was on holiday. So it was someone else. You know, it was just like a chain of events, but ultimately it's like it was my feature and it should have been me. So that is something where you can fuck ups still happen. And like they are horrible when they do. And I always say this, but it's always better to just come clean. So I remember like the next day telling the head sub who had been on holiday and telling her, and she was like, no, thank you for telling me. And she was like, and she was kind of annoyed. She was like, I was like, well, you had a holiday, it's not your fault. And also again, like telling Mario's agent, like being like, it's just like a mistake. And it's really hard to say that sometimes, but it's so much better than just like throwing someone else under the bus or like making up a web of lies to like cover it.
Yeah, completely.
And also the fact that it's still like something great still came from it. But oh my God, I think about that and I just want to be sick.
No, and I think like that was a really cool story, by the way. So thanks for sharing it.
That's right.
But I think making mistakes is human. I think it's human, but I learned making mistakes like and owning up to them the hard way because I used to get in trouble all the time because I'd make little, just nothing big, but then I'd try and cover it up. And I'm the same as you. Like it's way better to just own it, and it's okay. But it's funny how like a tiny little thing like that can ruin the whole experience, and that it's interesting. Yeah. That's the thing that you go to when you think about it looking back.
Yeah, I hate that, but it's always what I think of. I'm like, oh, but it's also like it was a learning, you know, everything. But sometimes it's like I didn't want to have a learning from that.
Yeah, I just wanted it to go smoothly.
Have you got like a bad mistake you've made that you can think of?
God, I used to fuck up all the time. My attention to detail is horrendous, but I know it is now, so I have to take like greater care. But I'm so scatty as a person. Like I'm here, there, and everywhere. My brain's flying around in 100 different conversations or topics at any one time. What am I don't know. Probably way back when. I can't think of one right now off the top of my head.
When I was a PA as well, that I learned that owning up to your mistakes from being a PA, because again, I wasn't the best PA, and I remember I'd like double booked Louise for something, and I just had to. I remember I was on my lunch break. I realized I did it. You know, like an all lunch break. You're like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I almost like without thinking, just straight after my lunch break, just like knocked on her office and went in and just like blurted it out and told her, and she was like fine. And I think the thing is, it's like obviously she was annoyed, but like you're never going to be like angry with someone who's like obviously standing there like I've messed up here. Like it's just, yeah, it's annoying, but we'll move on from it. Whereas, and so that's what I always remember. And I'm always telling my friends, like, if they've done something and they're like, oh, what should I say? And I'm just be honest.
Yeah.
It's so much better to be honest.
100%. Final question that I ask everyone on the show is, what is your version of beauty?
Oh God. Does everyone always do that as well? Like, oh God. Even though you sent the questions in advance. My version of beauty is I still would just say it's self-expression. It's just how I want to represent myself to the world and how people want to represent themselves. And whether that is very, if I'm having a bit of a wild moment and I want to get out, you know, like the rhinestones and have like a euphoria moment, or whether, you know, you want your like nude lip and your mascara just to feel like that bit more polished, or whether I want to look like have no makeup on, have the greasiest hair and film a TikTok. It's just how it's just expressing myself and just being who I am.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think there's so much to be said for just removing the pressure, like letting it all go out and just being you. Like learning to be yourself, I think, is one of the most content spaces you can be in.
Yeah. And I feel like it's a constant journey. And also, by the way, if you can hear that gurgitating, that is my washing machine. It's not me. As we're getting all deep and meaningful, my washing machine is like draining out like
I can't hear it. But yeah, thank you for that. It was really, I feel like it was a really wholesome conversation, and it was really nice to just share thoughts and opinions and chat. So thank you.
oh, thank you for having me.